Geocachomaniacs.
GeoGearHeads.
Welcome to episode 281 of the GeoGearHeads, and we're going to be talking once again about GPS tech. I'm Daryl W4, back as usual with, Chris. I'm going to keep saying that. I almost said the bad cop, but no, it's not anymore. Yes, I can't. It's just ingrained. It's kind of like 4 years of saying the same thing. Now you're going to make me change my pitch.
I should just go change my name again just to mess you up, Daryl. That would be the only reason.
That time I might actually get it.
Oh, well, then I'm leaving it. Hey, Daryl, don't we talk about GPS tech every week on this show? GeoGearHeads?
Well, we talk about location tech, but I don't know that I would call it GPS, because GPS is a very, very specific type of location.
And there's no R
tech
in this GPS. We're talking just GPS. That's the global positioning system. That's right. Beyond just the receiver you hold in your hand, be that a smartphone or some other dedicated device.
And we have a very special listener joining us today. And I don't mean special in the short bus. I mean special as in, very, very skilled with lots of specialty knowledge. And he went and did a whole bunch of research on this too.
He can't be a listener if he's speaking. He hasn't spoken yet, but he will.
He's listening right now.
Okay.
He's not a guest yet because we've not introduced him. We've just kind of nibbled around the edges. So Limax, welcome to the show, and welcome to being a guest on the show.
I appreciate it. It's good to be back.
As we make lots of fun of everyone. But you do have a lot of knowledge in this field to begin with, but you went and put in just an immense amount of research prepping for this show.
Yeah. Well, as I was remarking to you, I fell down a rabbit hole. I am an information junkie when it comes to this, and I did a heck of a lot of research actually when I was first getting into geocaching, because of course back then, being a ham radio operator, of course I can build everything from scratch, right? So I could build a GPS unit too. No, you can't. There was a lot involved with it. It's like, okay, I guess I got to come up with money somehow to actually buy one.
The good old days when you could actually build things.
Yeah. Yeah. And GPS is specifically the global positioning satellite system that the U.S. owns and operates. But we had stuff before that, and there's still stuff coming up. And there's competitors essentially to that. But let's start off with a little bit of history. And you want to tell us a little bit about the Loran system?
Yeah, actually, I became myself a bit familiar with the Loran system in the 80s. I'm not sure how far back it dates, actually. That's one thing I was unable to find any information on with the research I was doing. Both Pinpoint and You Are Here, the two of the books that I read, mentioned that it was around well before GPS and actually before any other satellite navigation. But it was basically fixed stations at known locations around. It was first for seafaring, and later they adapted it for aircraft. My dad had a Loran system in his airplane, which is why I knew about it. It was a big honking unit that you had to put in it to get it. And for a while, it was only available on the coast because they had no beacons in the middle of the country either. And it used triangulation, which is basically similar to the way the GPS does it. I think you only needed three signals for it. And Dad said, once they got established in the U.S., in the middle U.S., you go to use it, and then there'd be bad weather, and you couldn't use it. So it had.
Yeah, I know that I've seen systems that were built in like the 60s for Loran. Yeah. So I know that it was on ships at least that long ago, and I think even earlier than that. I want to say 50s.
I think it was 50s
Maybe.
or 40s. Yeah, at least. Yeah, and it was Loran C that my dad used. Actually, they still have Loran. It's Loran E is the current one. I had heard it had been decommissioned, but it might just be decommissioned in the United States and still in use in Europe.
Well, I know that they were supposed to decommission it, and then something happened, and they decided they had to extend its life.
Yeah, boy,
I think it was one of the time clock glitches or something like that with GPS, and they said, "Oh no, we still have to keep it around."
Yep, yep.
Yeah, I was familiar with the Loran C, and in the early days, I never saw it written, and I just heard it being used, and it was always on a boat, so I assumed it was SEA for the ocean.
Yeah, not
Yeah.
for C or whatever. However,
Right.
Yeah. Well, I want to say that that's how Lorenz got started. Is they were building the personal Lorenz systems for personal boats, not like yachts and stuff.
Yeah.
Not for the sheeps, but the little guys. Actually, I think they actually built some for like tugboats even, but yeah, they were the smaller systems. They weren't the big systems. Well, and I was on one of the old freighters that had one of the Lorenz systems, and it's like a full refrigerator size cabinet by Sperry just to do the processing. And this is one of those ones that was like the 60s. No,
Wow.
Sperry. Remember, I don't remember when they disappeared. I want to say it was like in the late 80s. But do you remember Sperry?
Sperry Computer Products?
Yes. Well, they were Sperry Electronics, I think, before they became Sperry Computers.
That's true. Not well, but the name does ring a bell.
I remember the logo, mostly because they had an office that we drove past like every weekend for a while.
Okay.
It was the same thing with me. The name Sperry rings a bell, but that's about it.
I seem to think of a word processor.
Yeah, they did word processors. That was part of their computer division. So, kind of like the Wang, they had a competitor to the Wang.
Terrible name, by the way.
Yes.
Unless you're having fun tonight.
Oh.
Anyway, let's move on. Do you have any other history you want to share with us before we get into GPS?
Well, yeah, it was it was really kind of interesting because GPS was not the first satellite navigation system we had. There were actually two others before that. Transit being actually the first one, and that actually came out of Sputnik going over, and a couple of engineers who figured out how to track Sputnik and figure out its position as it was going over. And the head of their department called them in and said, "Can you do this to do navigation with?" And they tackled the problem. Were able to. The couple problems with the transit system, though, I mean, it was very rudimentary. There wasn't that many satellites that actually got launched with, I think, maybe 5 or 6, if I remember correctly, in the research I did. It was only two-dimensional, and it took a heck of a long time to get a fixed point. So upwards of 15 minutes.
I have a GPS that still does that.
I think, this GPS here took that long. This one right here, the Magellan 310. That's my first GPS that I got off of eBay way back when. Found 10 caches with it.
How about this guy?
Oh gosh, yes.
GPS 80. That's a military one.
Yeah, that's the Garmin, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. My dad had one very similar to that he had in his aircraft once he switched from Loran. Yeah. But anyway, getting off the subject. And then after that, they started figuring out that they could probably use time differential to fix position. And that's where actually timation came from. And that's what was called. And they were experimenting with that they were experimenting with it to figure out how to do stuff, and that's where they started finding out about the time lag and stuff like that. The theory of relativity really does affect things. Is it?
Huh.
I think things out in space are going just that much slower than we are, or vice versa. I can't remember which direction it goes.
I think they're going faster.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, time goes a little bit faster for them, and so it's really kind of hard.
In orbit, you go faster. Yeah.
Yeah. But Timation was the precursor to GPS, and it was used, and it was a little bit better than the transit system. But
Timation just sounds like a Disney something or another.
Yeah.
So that's the one that went up in the 60s. Am I correct?
Yeah, it is. It went up in the 60s.
So that's the precursor that we talk about when we say that GPS technology goes back to the 60s.
Right. It would be the Timation system. Yeah, again, there was that was in Pinpoint. There was a pretty good write-up on that.
Yeah, which I had done that one, I think, as an audiobook.
So did I.
But basically, once all of this stuff started coming out, the military decided, hey, this is something that we can actually use.
Yeah, there was a lot of pushback on it, though. People kept on saying, well, what do we need this for? We can find out where we are other ways. Why do we need to put satellites in the air to do this?
That's what the corner gas station is for. Where am I? Oh.
Yes, but the bombs can't stop and ask for directions on their way.
That's what it is. I mean, it was meant it was meant to effectively drop bombs. That's what its original purpose was to pinpoint where to drop things. And it actually was first effectively used of all things during Desert Storm in the 90s. That was
the first time?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, that took me by surprise. I was thinking they would have used it earlier.
Yeah.
Because the guys were running around with the backpack-sized GPSs in some of the videos that I've seen from the 70s even.
Right.
But I think that was the whole thing. It was just, testing. It was not usable.
Right. And I was trying to, there was, which contractor was the head? It wasn't Raytheon. It wasn't Loral. Oh gosh, has just escaped me the name of the contractor for the original GPS units, the manpacks. And I'm not remembering it. Trimble was actually one of the first ones to start developing a commercial product.
Well, and one of the interesting things was because it was military, they added that selective availability, which I hope that all of the geocachers are familiar with, at least with the term.
Yeah.
But why don't you describe briefly what that is and why it was in there?
Well, selective availability was put in to not make things as accurate, and it was put in to shoot, my brain just shut off for a second there. It was put in order to not be not make it as accurate for civilian users who did not have the precision band. And that was part of the problem. People were developing these in the 80s, and everything was wide open. Now, what was interesting about the selective availability, it was officially turned on right before Desert Storm. The problem is that the Army had contracted with Trimble to create a bunch of handheld GPS units to use. And of course, they didn't have the extra technology because they couldn't get a military contract for it. They couldn't get the military specs for it. So 3 months after it was turned on, it was turned off again for the duration of Desert Storm because they were using civilian units anyway.
Yeah, well, and it was just kind of a silly thing. And a lot of it, if I remember some of the discussions early on, like right about Desert Storm time, they were afraid of like the IRA actions at that point. What happens if the terrorists and Ireland or the UK get a hold of this technology because it's going to be cheap and available? Yeah,
and that's
it
what it
will
was.
be.
But you always,
and now everyone has it in their phone.
Yeah,
but
because it's cheap and available.
Yeah, it went in with the intent to try to obscure it, but my thought was if it's going to be something like the Russians, they have their own system anyway.
Yeah.
But they're going to throw the horsepower at it to reverse engineer it. So if it's on, it's something that I think would have been defeated eventually anyway.
Right. And
well, how many military discoveries are we using today because they've become cheap and affordable? I mean, thousands. But anyway, go ahead.
Well, it was going to say, I mean, and the thing was, since Rockwell was taking so long to come out with these units, they were, the Army was bypassing it and getting the off-the-shelf units. So you always knew when a military operation was going on because suddenly your handheld unit started being more accurate.
Yeah. Well, and I remember all the videos with people running around in Desert Storm with Garmin's.
Mm-hmm. Actually, yeah. Do they have Garmin's or do they have Magellan's?
I think they had both.
Yeah.
But there were a bunch of, I think it was the E-Treks that I remember seeing, because they gave those to like a bunch of the smaller crews so that they knew where they were. But like the more important infantry divisions or whatever, they would get some of the better equipment, but they just started buying up all of these cheap handheld receivers and just giving them to everyone so that should something happen, they at least knew where they were.
Right. Yeah. Garmin, let's see, Garmin formed in the late 80s. I know Magellan and Trimble were around before that. And there was another company which name went in and out of my mind. And, as far as I know, they're no longer around in the original form. And
unfortunately, there's been a lot of that.
Yeah, there has been.
That's true. Yeah. Wet Coaster in the chat says he saw some Omega navigation units on a ship, but never had to use it.
Interesting.
Well, we've been talking about the history for almost 20 minutes now, so let's get into like the overview and actually talk about. Let's talk first about the different location systems because people probably don't even know what those are.
Right, and I found 4 different ones. There's GPS, of course. There was also how much detail do you want me to go in with these, Daryl? Do you want me to?
Well, let's go into a bunch of information about GPS and GLONASS, since they're the two that we can actually use right now.
Right. Yeah. So the GPS, which is the United States system, operated by Schriever Air Force Base in Colorado, under the direction of TUSOPS, which is the Second Space Operations Squadron.
I love that name, by the way.
What was that?
I love that name. I want to go work for the Second Space Operations Squadron.
Yeah.
What does the first one do?
They do have civilians working for them. I do know that. I don't know who one SOPS is. I didn't take the time to research that.
And are they out of Schriever?
Yeah, they're all out of Schriever.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, Schriever is the place for military satellite operations. So, and yeah, there are several groups there. So currently there's 31 satellites in the system. That's 28 and 6 circular orbits with 4 or more satellites per them, plus 3 geostationary satellites as well, and that's the WAS part of it. Yeah, which I don't hear WAS discussed as much these days. There used to be this GPS has WAS with it, but now it's GPS and GLONASS we've got together.
Yeah, well, and the WAS actually used some terrestrial stations too, if I remember, to help correct and make faster acquisitions. And my experience was it just never worked.
Well, they're still up there and sending their signals out. Yeah. So Yeah, these 6 circular orbits that we've got with 4 more satellites, each of them are at a 55-degree inclination relative to the equator, separated by multiples of 60 degrees right ascension. And we'll delve into that a little bit as well. It's an approximate circular orbit at about 26,560 kilometers, with an orbital period of about 1/2 a sidereal day, give or take just a bit there. It operates on 2 different frequencies, the L1 band and the L2 band. And actually, there's going to be an L5 band added, that got added on the GPS-2F satellites as well.
Well, and that's the one that's supposed to be a little bit better at penetrating buildings, if I recall.
I think so. Yeah, I did find the frequency for that. It's slightly lower than the other two, but what's 100 megahertz when you're up that high? So
true.
Yeah,
but every little bit helps.
Right.
Especially with propagation.
Yeah. And Chris, I saw in the chat you actually figured out what OneSop is.
Yeah, I just Googled OneSop. That was from the Wikipedia article. So they're command and control for 4 distinct constellations: defense support, mid-course correction, NASA research program, and I think there was one more I had to cut off.
Oh,
it wouldn't fit at all.
So, I want to work for 2-step.
I
want to support the GPS.
Yeah. So yeah, OneSop seems to be more defense.
Okay.
And
it's the secret stuff.
More, helping everyone else.
Right. Yeah, it's one of those things I just never got around to Googling it. I burned out a couple of weeks ago.
No, I completely understand.
So in addition to that, we also got the GLONASS system, which is operated by something I'm going to mispronounce, and my brother-in-law will kill me because I won't be able to pronounce it correctly.
I couldn't do any better, so.
Krasnomensk.
Yeah, something like that. It's a lot more consonants than I'm used to. At least it's not.
You're not supposed to have that many in a row.
Yeah, it's not as bad as Welsh, but it's pretty bad. Anyway, they've got 24 satellites in their system, which are in 3 orbital planes as opposed to 6 like GPS has, and they have about 8 satellites each as opposed to around 4 in the GPS system. They're at a 64.8 inclination relative to the equator, separated by multiples of 120. Makes sense. They've got three planes instead of 6. It's an approximate circular radius of 25,510 kilometers. So it's inside the GPS satellites as well. And their orbital period is about 8/17 of a sidereal day. And it's like, why did they choose that of all things? And,
can't you say half?
Yeah. It was interesting, because we'll get into this in a little bit here. It's got 2 different frequencies, and the frequency changes depending on what satellite number it is.
Oh, interesting.
And they're just and they're off by just a little bit each one of them, but they got an L1 band and L2 bands just like the GPS units.
So is that kind of more channels? The idea of breaking up the entire band into channel widths?
I think so. I mean, it's channelizing it a little bit more. I don't know, with spread spectrum, I'm not sure how much it gets you or not.
Maybe that's to help with jamming, against jamming.
Maybe it could be. That's one thing that people are constantly working on, is trying to defeat jamming. So, and what's interesting is a GLONASS satellite and a GPS satellite will complete 17 and 16 revolutions respectively around the Earth every 8 days. So they're constantly passing one another. I think, with the GLONASS being a little bit further inside, it's that's actually interesting. No, it's actually a little.
No, it's closer.
It's a little bit less than half. So, being inside the GPS satellites, that makes sense.
So that both of these, we need to say, GPS satellites are not in geosynchronous orbit. They do orbit around the Earth.
No.
So,
yeah, geosync is the money orbit. Everybody wants to be there.
So GLONASS and GPS, those are the ones that we know. Those are the ones that our handheld units can use.
Well,
but
I've got a handheld unit that can use it.
Well, they have the possibility of using it, or should I say that? Yeah. The other two are still in the building phase, are they not?
They're under development. Galileo has launched a few of its satellites already.
Well, I believe Galileo actually, did we do the story that Galileo announced functional operations now?
Is it
but it's like testing.
Not fulfilled.
Yeah. Right. It's limited locations that it will work, but they have declared themselves functionally operational now, if I remember. But these guys are further from the Earth than GPS.
Yeah, they are. They're actually they're at 23,000.
They're inside GLONASS. So we have, as far as we have now, it's Galileo.
Okay, I was thinking GLONASS, they were the furthest ones out.
GPS.
No, they're the closest in.
Oh, that's right. That's right. Because they want to do the two-way, so they had to stay in even closer.
Right. Yeah, and they're going to be following the GLONASS model of doing 3 orbital planes at 120 degrees each right ascension. And they're going to have a 56-degree inclination. It's like, which is pretty close to actually what GPS uses, since GPS is at a 55-degree inclination as well. So their orbital period is 7/12 of a sidereal day. They're again very close to a half a day, but just a little bit less, less than that. Yeah, the interesting thing I found out about this, and I actually heard this on another podcast, it's a there are no other podcast 23-centimeter band, ham band in the Netherlands. And why only the Netherlands? Does it? Maybe that's the only place that they've got them right now is over, Europe, where it can be used.
Or is there a ground station there?
It could be. I mean, that was quite interesting. I mean, because we have access to the 23-centimeter band here too. So I don't.
Right, but we probably don't have the ground station. Even if we were going to have one, they probably don't have one yet. So I'm wondering if maybe it's a ground station that's actually causing the interference as it talks with the satellites.
It could be. Yeah, I don't know.
It's speculation, but
yeah.
They have to have the ground stations for Galileo because it is a two-way system.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, and then of course we've got the Baidu system, which is the Chinese one also. And they're going to have actually 35 satellites in theirs. They're going to have 5 in geosynchronous orbit, 27 in the mid-Earth orbit, which is the same that GPS, Galileo, and GLONASS uses. And then they're going to have 3 in, I used to know what it's intermittent geosynchronous orbit or something like that. And that's just not a term I'm even familiar with or I've even heard.
It's like a broken clock. It's at least right twice a day.
Yeah, or something like that.
Yeah.
I don't know. Like,
it's sometimes there, it's not, sometimes not.
Yeah. So, I mean, is it going in and out of the geosync orbit, or who knows?
Maybe it has an elliptical path instead of a round path. I don't know.
Yeah. But, it's actually going to be a 55-degree inclination. That's what they're shooting for, which is the same as GPS. And they're the ones that are actually going to be the furthest outside. They're going to be at 27,878. Is where they're thinking 20,878 kilometers. So they'll be the furthest out of all of them.
Right. Outside of GPS.
Right.
Yeah. So I get the two confused from time to time because, well, they're both new systems.
Right.
Yeah. And you know what? I realized there's an Indian system that we didn't mention in this. So there's actually 3 developing systems.
Oh, I didn't even hear about that one. So that's how I missed it. Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's IRNSS, I think.
Okay.
I just did a quick Google search. It's Indian Regional Navigational Satellite System.
Oh, regional. So it's not
Yeah.
going to be a worldwide.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it doesn't look like it's going to be. It's probably, I think, intended for worldwide, but they're starting with regional.
Sure.
That makes sense.
And they launched their first satellite in July of 2013. So they probably have a long way to go.
Yeah, well, I mean, Galileo and Baidu are not going to reach full capacity until about 2020.
Navic. That makes more sense. Navic. Navic.
Okay. Yep.
So you said Galileo and Baidu won't reach full capacity until 2020.
About 2020. That's what I read. Can't remember which source that was in now.
One of the many. GeoGearHeads is the source for this now.
There we go. Yeah. I should caveat by saying I'm not an expert. I am just incredibly curious.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so how do some of these work? I mean, how does a GPS receiver work with the satellites?
It actually uses time differential. I've got a quote here that's from Pinpoint that I'll just read out, because that kind of explains it in a nutshell.
Mm-hmm.
The GPS receiver performs calculations by constructing imaginary spheres. The first GPS signal tells the receiver how far it is from the satellite. It could thus be anywhere on the surface of the sphere with the satellite at the center. The second signal creates a second sphere centered on the second satellite, thus placing the receiver somewhere on the circle where the two spheres intersect. The third satellite, by adding a new sphere to the mix, narrows the location down to 2 points, one of which is obviously wrong, usually miles above the surface of the planet or deep in the Earth's mantle, can be discarded. The fourth satellite signal resolves any timing ambiguities, since phones and GPSRs don't come with a super precise atomic clock.
So it's a three-dimensional Venn diagram.
Basically.
I like that reference.
Yeah.
Hey, quick break going back though. Team Avenue in the chat says there's also QZSS, which is by Japan, and the Australians apparently are getting excited about that one.
Oh yeah.
So there's 4 systems under development.
Yeah, I actually hear about that. Yeah. I'm surprised they had.
And I think that one's again regional with plans to expand.
Yeah. Yeah, Baidu I didn't hear about until I read Pinpoint. So yeah, I was aware of Galileo and GLONASS only because those have been making the news so much lately.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I'm not surprised I'm missing things.
Well, and Galileo and GPS have both had to replace satellites. And there was a point at which, not Galileo, sorry, GLONASS and GPS had to replace satellites. There was a point in which GLONASS wasn't working well. And that's part of why it wasn't used. And then they went and did a whole bunch of investment and got it, up to current standards or requirements, whatever you want to say, to get it, a good location again. And that's when we started seeing it all of a sudden in all of these new chipsets. And eventually we started seeing it in the units we have in our hands.
Yeah, well, the Soviet Union, I know, started developing it, if I remember right, back in the 60s also, about the same time, we were messing with Timation and this is why I've got notes. Timation and Transit.
Right.
And I think, it might have been the fall of the Soviet Union when they were having economic problems. They just kind of let it languish. And it's only recently that they've decided that it's a good thing, to get going again with it.
Yeah. Yep. Didn't some of their satellites fall out of their orbital paths and they had to go and bump them?
Most likely.
Yeah.
It's nice to hear that satellites that old can still be bumped.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, so a GPS unit makes these three-dimensional Venn diagrams and figures out from, that, okay, you've got to be here.
Right. Right.
Then what?
Well, I've got notes on that.
Okay.
So, before we kind of get into it, there are different things with orbital mechanics and coordinate systems.
Because
Satellite.
you can't use the GPS coordinates once you get off the surface of the planet. So how do you map where these things go?
Well, which there's two different. There's mapping the satellite itself. We use right ascension of the ascending node and orbital inclination, and that basically, that's what I was kind of talking about earlier. You've got the equator that says like this. The inclination will, of course, people listening can actually see me tilting my hand, can't they?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And that's where we get, the orbits will go around the Earth that way. And then right ascension of the ascending node just means where on that particular part of that orbit are they at that time. And let's see, the ascending node, if I remember right, I think that might be at zero zero longitude. I think is where that is. Now, using that, we can then use what's called ECI, which is Earth-centered inertial coordinates. And the there's three axes for that. It's just, like a three-dimensional Cartesian surface. I guess it wouldn't be plane, it would be a surface. And so you've got axis in the X direction is pointing in the direction of the vernal equinox, which is the moment when the vernal equinox happens on the Earth. So, and I think it might be at, since you need since you need to reference it to something, and again, I think it would be at zero longitude. And then you got an axis that's parallel to the rotation axis or the north polar axis of the sun, and that's the z-axis. And then you need an additional axis, so why not 90 degrees from that first x-axis? And there you've got your coordinates. The one we're more familiar with is actually Earth-centered, Earth-fixed coordinates, where the x-axis from the center is always on the 0 degree longitude line. The z-axis is the same. It's through the North Pole, and the y-axis is then again 90 degrees to the towards the right of the x-axis. And with the satellite itself, it receives information, up there. It's one heck of a stream that it receives and sends, and it gets updated data daily. With new ephemeris. I'm not sure if it gets a new ephemeris every day. It probably does not get new ephemeris coordinates. I think those are good for usually a couple of weeks. And it kind of knows where it is on that based on that, getting that updated data and, keeping its clock running. And from that, it can convert that into, well, actually, I don't think it does, but using that information, that's what it sends down to the the GPS receiver. And the receiver just measures the amount of time it takes to receive that signal. The GPS says, this is when I send the signal. The GPSR says, okay, I received that signal. How long, and it's now this time. So that's the time differential that you get from that. And it gets that actually from the four satellites that have the strongest signals. I mean, it's that's just how it works. It's a very selective thing like that, and it needs the four satellites because you have to have that time correction, like we were talking about earlier with the theory of relativity. I mean, things out there move just slightly faster than the stuff in here, and getting that information, it gets the known locations of all these, converts it all to Earth-centered, Earth-fixed coordinates, as far as I can tell, and then just does matrix multiplication on it. Yeah,
Just
I've got, yeah.
That's what
this is not math that I want to be trying to figure out.
No.
Oh God, it was such gorgeous math though.
Oh, it's might be, but there's no way I'm figuring that out, quick enough to find a cache.
I was going to say, by the time you figure it out, the Earth has moved and your location is no longer valid.
Right.
But
I mean, you've got, your known things are the position of the satellites in CEF, the pseudo ranges to the satellite, which is the time differential. It says, okay, this is how long it took. Let's multiply that by the speed of light. And that's how far it weighs.
Good thing that's a constant.
Yeah. And it knows the radius of the Earth. The unknown position is where you are and the clock bias. So, I mean, I did write one line down of that equation, which is, it did simplify quite a bit. But I mean, this is rho. In this case, rho is the pseudo range, and there's a little x, little y, little z, which is the position of the satellite. Big X, big Y, big Z is the unknown location, and r is the radius. So it comes out to rho squared minus the quantity x squared plus y squared plus z squared, those are all lowercase, minus r squared is equal to c, which is the clock bias correction, minus 2 big X times little x, minus 2 big Y times little y, minus 2z times little z. And of course, there's 4 rows of this. And then once solved, you can get the corrected clock bias. Oh, yeah. Just on a side note, a friend of mine saw me reading, I think it was the textbook. I was reading that, and he said that he had to give a presentation to the Air Force on how the GPS works. And when he came to the slide talking about this in the clock bias, he had an unfortunate misspelling on that particular slide.
Okay, I can see where this is going.
And that's all I'm going to say, because this is a family-friendly show.
Right.
Well, it probably got the airman's attention.
It probably did, yeah. But he said it's not really the kind of thing, and he knew I was doing this. He says, when you present this, make sure that you got things written correctly. So, yeah.
Nice.
Well, and you did a whole bunch of other,
yeah. Oh yeah.
But you've done a whole bunch of other research in here too that I'd love to get into, but I'm not sure we really should get into it on the podcast, like what's actually in that data stream. But maybe some of this antenna design stuff would be a good idea.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, and there it is. The purpose is to filter and amplify the incoming GPS signal. To make it, and to make it usable, the incoming signal actually needs to be amplified by as much as 33 to 55 dB, which is 1,000 to 10,000 times the strength that it gets in. So
and you still get 18 hours of battery life out of a GPS unit.
Yeah.
When you think about it, it's got to amplify it up to 10,000 times.
Yeah.
Well, think about why GPS kills your phone battery so quickly.
Mm-hmm.
There's part of the reason right there.
Yeah.
Yeah. The phone signal from the towers is so much stronger than the GPS signal coming from space.
Oh, it is very much so.
And it needs to boost that just to be able to do something with it.
Right. And I actually have been in a situation where I've been out of data range recently, geocaching, where I actually saw my position on Cachely, but I didn't have a map. I actually had to switch over to my offline map. It's like, oh yeah, there I am. There's no geocaches around here because I don't have a cell signal to give me the information. But it knew where I was.
Caching is nice.
Yeah. Yeah, the important thing is that the GPS actually worked in the unit. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and a lot of people don't realize that the GPS is still working. You just don't have any reference data like, maps, right, or, caches or points of interest, because that's not necessarily cached on the device. It's usually expected by most apps and programmers that you're going to have a data signal. You know, geocaching apps are smart enough to cache some of the data, but most of the apps that you have don't do that. And in many cases, the maps that they're using aren't even licensed for that. They can't cache the maps.
Right. Well, most phones don't actually have enough storage to cache a map, of sufficient detail to.
Well, especially if you're getting into the satellite stuff, which is what I prefer.
I have kind of tried to teach myself how to use offline maps more and more. I actually downloaded the California map in anticipation of last September when I did the Jeremiah's Gold series up in Morgan Territory. I hadn't been up there for a lot of years, and I didn't know if there was cell coverage up there at all or not. I mean, I had my GPS with me as well, of course, but it's a lot easier to read the descriptions on an iPhone than it is on a Magellan 510.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah,
we have been spoiled with the cell phone, the smartphone. You can still cache with your GPS, and that works well. But getting the information in and out of a GPS is more difficult.
It is.
Yeah, and that's why so many of us like to have both devices. It's such a pain to juggle two different devices.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I was doing that. I mean, my birthday trip, I was juggling a cell phone and a GPS all the time. But it was actually the cell phone was just to contact Chris and tease him about the fact that I had good weather and he didn't.
What do we have, like 18 inches of rain that day or something? Who knows?
Something like that.
Yeah. And one of the best things about cell phones is now when you're talking to your GPS, it doesn't look funny.
Yeah.
Right.
And that just went over the head
what is
of
that
probably
old school phone you have?
Yeah, well, anyone who's been caching since like 2010, 2011 probably has no clue what that is.
Mm-hmm.
But one of the old ways that cachers used to look normal is it'd hold their GPS up to their head, their GPSR up to their head,
Right.
and pretend they're talking on it like one of the old brick phones. Well, now that it's a cell phone,
Yeah. Well, I mean, you look at the design. I mean, here's the 510. It doesn't look like a modern cell phone anymore. I mean, it did look like the old AT&T one I had years ago, but this is, definitely not. And it looks like anything current.
All right. Well, in the chat, Team Avaju says he doesn't think he's ever before seen this trying to explain so well on a podcast. And I think that's a good thing. Hopefully we haven't confused people too much. I mean, there's a ton of information in here, but now hopefully you're not going to go out and do anything with this, but you'll have a better idea of how this GPS technology works.
Yeah. Just know it's magic. That's the way it works. It magically sends numbers to you.
Yeah, GPS doesn't always work too well. Yeah, I'm holding up a cartoon right now, and this is a picture of Moses, and I believe he looks like he's looking at a smartphone, and it says right here, arriving in 40 years. That can't be right.
Team Avaju also says that knowing the payload, and that's referring to the data in the signal, is always nice, and he demands that we do a GPS Tech 3.
I assume you're going to leave my stuff in the notes that we do.
Yeah, the notes aren't going away. No. So maybe we'll plan on doing another one in the fall. Maybe we'll let people digest this a little bit. Maybe ask some questions if you have any ideas of stuff that you need to know a little bit more about. Send them in, and we'll maybe try to get that on the GPS Tech 3 show.
Well, I can actually get into the trying to find the location on the satellite itself. Yeah,
Limax, you've already done all the work. I mean, we've barely touched any of your notes here.
Yeah, I was able to find a lot of really good reference material.
Mm-hmm.
And, I put a bibliography in the notes as well, the ones that I got information from. And
yeah, and we're going to include that in the show notes for tonight's show as well.
Yeah. Yeah, it just irks me I was not able to get to the third edition of that one book. But can't have everything.
No, but this is so much good information. And I still don't grok how this thing works, but at least now I have a little bit of a concept of what's actually happening.
Yeah. It's in doing this research, it's kind of the thing that I kind of wish I was able to do, gotten into more of the satellite orbital mechanics when I was in undergrad and graduate school. I went more applied mathematics, which does serve me well in things like this, but there's just so much to learn here, and I've got an insatiable curiosity.
Well, I mean, this is a good reason. Kids, stay in school, learn your math, because you may be a satellite or GPS technician one day, and you're going to need to know all this.
Yeah.
And you probably can't work at TUSOP without that.
Exactly.
No, you couldn't really work at you couldn't work at TUSOPs with that. No, without it.
There is a 3-SOP as well.
3
SOPs.
Yeah, there's a 3 SOPs and a 4 SOPs. Yes.
The 3 SOPs is just president and vice president communication, mobile communication.
Yep.
I wonder if you could work there without knowing all of this high-tech stuff. Because I just want to work for the Space Command.
I know.
Well, I know. See, in the beginning of the book on Pinpoint, the person was able to get a tour of the 2 SOPs area, but there's so many horror stories about Schriever that I've heard from people. The guards are basically 18-year-olds with a gun, and they're trigger happy. So it's not it's more difficult to get in and out of than other places.
Which does make some sense.
Yeah,
it really does. I mean, that's one thing you want to keep secure. So, Limax, thank you so much. We thank you for your time and research. We're going to use that data a little bit later on another GPS tech show because Team Naviju demands it. That's the reason right there.
Right. If Team Naviju demands it, then we've got to deliver.
Yes, exactly.
And we do have a bunch of other shows coming up, of course. May 25th, that's next week, is going to be our randomized show once again. And this time we're going to have Coach V. He is the CZO of Muncie, but he's taking off that hat just to talk with us about a bunch of different things. And we've got some interesting stuff in there, including...
Are we going to make him do math? Let's make him do math.
No, I don't think we're going to make him do math.
Oh,
but we're going to stump him with, I think, some indoor positioning stuff.
Ooh.
Because that's getting kind of hot right now.
Because I have to know where I am at the mall.
Or in Lowe's, as Google apparently thinks that's really important.
That's true.
They actually went so far as to demo that one on stage.
Oh.
So the first show of June is going to be on June 1st. And that show 283, Caches Along a Route 2. That's number 2. I can't believe that's only the second one we've done on that. Anyway, June 8th is going to be talking about logging again, and especially with some of the changes in the logging of caches, we figured it's worthwhile to go back and take a look at the different ways that we log. So again, if you have tips or tricks, that's another great one to show or to send it in for the show. And then June 15th, Gary from Geocache Talk. Yes, we'll be on to talk with us about building lists. So this is, how to get your lists of caches together. The, caches that you really want to hit and put them together in various ways.
December for building like Christmas lists, but this is geocache.
Yeah, lists. No, this is cashless.
Oh, that makes a lot more sense. Then.
Cashless.
That's the name of my new geocaching app.
Or how about the band?
Ooh. Or how about my bank account?
Well, that's more of a state, not so much a name.
I think that's a day of DNFs is cashless.
Oh yes, there you go. It was cashless the other day. Hey, thank you guys for listening. Be sure to check the Cashmaniacs website at cashmaniacs.com for more on the GeoGearHeads, including show notes for this and all our episodes. We love hearing from our listeners. So leave us feedback by emailing geogearheads at cashmaniacs.com or through social media. Your support helps keep the Cashmaniac shows coming. Please consider becoming a patron through the link on our website to support the Cashmaniac shows. GeoGearHeads is produced by Chris Umfenauer and Daryl Wattenberg. The show's copyright 2017 by Daryl Wattenberg. All rights reserved.
Cash with the Cashmaniacs.